Yay. Hey, Yvonne.
Hello again.
Yes, thank you for getting me on out of my closet again. So good.
Oh dear, yes. Well, I think that we all need to come out of our closet of conditioning and programming and find our authentic self and give that expression.
Mm,
The conditioning and programming that we've had for thousands of years is to mold ourselves or be molded into something that somebody else wants for their own agenda. And so we don't remember who we are, and we don't, when I look at my childhood, I would look at children and my grandchildren, in the beginning, they have this ability to just be so free.
mm.
And then how soon do we tell them, no, get into that box? So it's
Yeah,
time to come get into that closet. And so it's time to come out of the closet.
yeah. So beautiful. And I see that once we get molded and almost domesticated into that other way of being, other than being who we were in our authentic expression, we actually find, well, I have found for myself that for quite some time I actually felt comfortable in that not me space because it was
Mm-hmm.
safer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my spirit from within, and I guess my calling or my purpose or my soul's journey here never allowed me to sit in that compliance state for too long. And so I had to break out of it, and I had zero control over that. I was really trying to fit in like everybody else did, but internally it just went in against my nature so strongly. And I think that that pulse of my nature has come out over the course of my lifetime quite strongly, breaking away from the Netherlands on my own and then finding myself traveling around the world with a family in tow, and then coming to that place like, well, that is actually, despite the strange um, contrast and contradiction that may have, that marriage constellation wasn't allowing me to find really who I was. And it was only after I um, moved out of that I really started looking within. And so I was just operating on a whole bunch of ideas and concepts and contracts and constructs of belief that totally limited my own expression of my own sovereignty. I wasn't my own sovereign man at all. I was just some formulated series of identities, a very lovable mammal, as I would call it. I was very community driven and very community orientated. But boy, when I started scratching at the surface of wanting to re-enable my nature and restore my self-sovereign nature, oh my goodness, all those layers of conditioning that then had to be undone and be looked at for their, how would we say it, their distortions of what is actually true and what is actually real. um, that was an interesting journey to kind of peel those layers back and then be led into greater spaces of self freedom, so to speak, where I wasn't basing my life so much around what everybody else was thinking about, or more what I was thinking that they would be thinking, because I didn't hear their thoughts. I wasn't hearing what they were saying. This is a fascinating journey, and I'm glad that we called this subject for today "Unpacking Self-Sovereignty." And just want to invite you to share from your take on the word. I've been going at this for 6 years or more, and I've looked at all the kind of syntax and the language and the roots and the origins and the etymology and the archetypal kind of value or meaning of the words that are all interlinked with what sovereignty is. And I can say it's been anything that what what happened for me is that I had a great insight that whatever I thought was to reclaim self-sovereignty totally appalled me, because it was all about studying the law and writing letters to the council that I wasn't going to pay my parking tickets, and then I was going to be a sovereign man. And I was just like, this is the greatest load of bullshit, and such an emasculated pathway. It's a pathway, it's a legitimate one, and these people do become their own leaders, but you become your own leader because of an oppressor. But the oppression doesn't happen from outside. I found that all the oppression I was actually doing to myself really on my inside. So I just want to open up with that, and just invite you to share some of your comprehensions around this, because this is a huge subject.
Well, I just love how you dive in. It's so good. Look, I wrote a post about 3 days ago. I lose that. You do know when we first started this journey together, you said to me that you were intending to write once a week, and how did I do it every day? And it was day 320, I remember. Do you know, today it was day 383, and I'm definitely losing count. So a few days ago, I wrote a post about breaking free from the uncomfortable comfort zone. And that's what you're talking about. You wanted to break free, but you were using the conditioned things that you thought were real, like the council and all of those people, and to take back your sovereignty, you had to get their permission for some reason. And think now we are learning that all that is false. And it's interesting to me, because I often say to you that we've lived each other's lives, because you talked about your marriage and how you felt that, you know, you needed to break free from that. Not that it was a constriction, it's just that it wasn't a place where you could find your sovereignty or your authenticity. And I was married for 23 years, and it was, you know, it was something that, very high principled lady. I was never going to leave that marriage, but my soul was dying. I just found myself shriveling up inside. So I took the plunge and left. And so I understand, you know, I went on my search to find my authentic self. And I found, what I found was that I had been duped into playing the game, so to speak, to fit in, as you say. And I was never a fitting in person. You know, that was so far from my authentic self. In fact, you know, I belong to a walking club. Hello, everyone. Isn't it lovely to see people are actually following us? I found that I had to totally strip away all these false ideas about what it was that I was supposed to look like in the different roles that I was playing. What was I supposed to be like as a mother, rather than doing that? That's one role that I found that I never asked permission for. It was just a natural thing, and you know, and I did it well, and I didn't ever allow any external forces to change that. However, again, you're still hooked in, because then you get hooked into their schooling and how that's got to go, and so you have to mold them into these boxes, and at the same time you are, well, I was constantly telling them, you can be anything you want to be, don't restrict yourself, blah, blah, blah. You are magnificent beings of, you know, and they're all like, really? But you know, we had to find a way to be in two worlds. Well, this is how I feel, and that is becoming more and more obvious today, that we are living in two worlds. And so finding sovereignty, well, both of us had to learn to speak this language. I think we're
Mm.
doing damn well, you know. The world sovereignty. I took, when I was thinking about it earlier in the week, I got this thing over. Sovereignty is about kingdom, and it comes back to the kingdom of heaven is within. You know, it's wonderful how all these religious organizations, and look, I don't want to offend anybody, but all these religious organizations keep telling you that this, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within, but don't go there because we'd rather have it for ourselves, and we'll keep it for you. You know, you can't have the key because we hold the key. When you think about it, it's pretty bizarre. So let's look at it. Being your own, being your own law, being your own. I can't find a word for it yet. We haven't got a word for it yet. But
being your own leader.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
The word that was coming through was being your own liver. But seeing you're going through a liver cleanse, that's not good.
Well, it's not necessarily something that's far off, because I have looked into some of the physiological understandings through the Chinese medicine lens, and then particularly the old Chinese medicine lens.
Yeah.
And liver is the storehouse of the ethereal soul. It is a aspect of ourself that comes into our being, has a housing place there, and it brings forth and with it all the knowledge and wisdom as a kind of traveling soul into our being. It is also the storehouse of the unconscious, where there can be a lot of trauma stored. And also it is the innate knowing of self that also comes from there, that we then have to kind of bring out of that space in order to bring that to our conscious mind, that not only are we the sovereignty of ourselves, we are also able to, like I've discovered for myself, unpacking the language, that it's about me being my own leader, me activating and training myself to think for myself, to not be reliant on story or narrative from third parties outside of myself that I will just take as an authority on a subject, but that I actually render all information coming through my own critical thinking, through my own ability to dissect truth from fiction. And it's quite simple, really, because either a story is carrying a fear-based narrative, or it is free of that. And when it's free of that, that doesn't mean that therefore it is, it's almost like, to speak in a sovereign way, there's a whole bunch of things that are not said. And there's a whole bunch of things that don't need to be said in order to claim the truth or state the truth, because the truth doesn't need any defending. It doesn't need any stating, any articulation. This then brings me back to what I call cult programming, and this transgenerational conditioning of particularly through the Western succession of empire and Newtonian scientism. There's been so much brought into our collective consciousness as the Western men and women on this earth, that has compromised and really constricted so much of the truth, and has appropriated that truth by pointing at all sorts of other directions and naming all of those things. But what it didn't do in the process of also consolidating the English language during the beginnings of what I call empire, it didn't actually name or stipulate or articulate in great clarity the relevancy of anyone's free will, the intricacies and the intrinsic nature of our freedom, and how we are innately and originally a human culture of love. Of course, they weren't going to tell anybody that, because if they do that, then we're all going to believe something different than being well programmable let's call them tech slaves, in a system that serves a different agenda than the liberation and the exploration of human consciousness in its capacity of what it can achieve. I do see that we are going through a humanitarian cycle in consciousness. And so there's no point being upset about where we are. It's just, what do we do with that? And in order for me to gain more insight into my own self-sovereign nature and the return to that state of freedom where I'm not being affected by what's necessarily going on around me and the opinions of others about me and so forth, or wanting to, there's a prelude to that, even, is that it's not the opinions that of others that I hear, it's the fear that I have subconsciously of their opinions that I project that makes me not even want to step out of line. In order for me to come into more awareness, like what's really all going on here, I had to go and explore trauma. I had to explore cult programming, the effects of trauma-based mind control. And that is a lot to take in, because that means getting real with and coming to terms with that the westernized civilizational modality that we're operating on, which seems to have the economy as its greatest prize and politics as its means to accomplish that, that is nothing short of utter human damage, and that it damages humans every single generation. And it's the cause for the intergenerational hand down of trauma, but it's the seed origin of the misuse of intelligence, causing war, causing artificial scarcity. And we are at the effects of that. And I can see that, okay, great, that's all performing a function with purpose for me to reclaim my sovereignty. But wow, that's still, when I think about it, that's quite a bit to take in if we want to explore this territory for our own self liberation, self sense of, I'm my own free man, I'm my own free woman kind of sense of being. But without looking at trauma and how we got affected through our conditioning and our upbringing, that has been very much far removed from how we would do it in nature, how we would do it naturally, how it is actually natural to be doing it together. The impacts of that, when they are not understood, which there is more awareness around it coming, I see that growing very, very rapidly. But wow, if you look in the main, the awareness around trauma, well, people can see trauma outside of themselves in other people, but to go and look at it within and then unpack what that is made of and how that internal landscape operates. And then you find that we disassociated and that there's all these different parts of self that splintered off because of the trauma. And then there's that inner child work. And before we know it, we're not talking about sovereignty as something great and grandeur and beautiful and stepping into. We have to go into the mud and the muck to actually look at, why am I not that? What is sitting in the way of feeling free? What is sitting in the way of me feeling alive and activated and clear-headed? And that's a dense series of questions to ask oneself, because the only answers that will bring us a setting free kind of sensation, in my experience, has been going there, has been going within to look at, why am I doing it like this? Why am I putting myself under somebody? Why am I afraid of their judgment? Why? And every single question of why, there's only one answer that I found really good for that, is human damage.
Wow, it's interesting. I wrote something while I was thinking about what we were going to do. And I wrote down, all human suffering has been caused by the self-interest of the governors, corrupt governments in an ego battle.
Yeah.
And that's the trauma you talk about. So, it's one of the things you just said about when you hit your own truth is there is no need for justification. what I found as I went down that rabbit hole many years ago to unpeel and look for who was in here, what was the core of this incarnated being. What I found was that it took such courage. However, because of the conditioning of how I operate and how we're taught to operate, and that is through right, wrong, good, bad, which is all through the eyes of judgment.
Yeah.
So as you do the internal work, and when you really realize that the truth is that I am the creator of my reality, so why the hell have I created this shit? And I've got to then take responsibility for that. And I've changed that word to respondability, the ability to respond at will by choice. Then I have to take ownership. And very few people have the courage to take that ownership because they cannot find the way to do that without the judgment. And then feel that they've been bad, they've been stupid. How could I have been so deluded? How could I have not seen that? And all these stories that we put on ourselves, instead of just saying, wow, that was really good conditioning, but I see you, and thank you, but no thank you, without the judgment. So yes, going back and finding the trauma, but then bringing that trauma home with love to a place where there is no judgment, there's no justification, there's just total acceptance and the awareness that that part that was traumatized only requires to be loved, not to be pulled apart and judged and have the whys answered. What is. There are some people who think you can go back into your past and visualize it to be different. And my past used to say to me, what do you mean? It happened, okay? So no, it worked for me. And I found, therefore, that my past was what made my present. And I had learned to be grateful for every miserable little moment and every joyful little moment. Because it is, the end result is sitting here. And I was looking at it like, what do you call it? A string of pearls. If I see a pearl that I don't like and I want to take it out, I have to break the string. And I don't want to be broken. I want to be whole. And I found that the wholeness I was looking for was always in there, but was hidden by all those outer influences. And to become authentic is a place, or to have your own sovereignty, which is what we're talking about here, is to be able to speak your truth from I messages. We have again been conditioned to say, well, he made me feel this. Well, no one can make me feel anything but me. I'm the feeler person. Like I'm the thinker person. So what I feel is mine. The fact that it was brought up because of someone else, that's just, for me, really a gift. I had to laugh the other day. I had a post on a group, and I think it was something about my garden. I wrote about my garden, that I was creating a new garden. I had the analogy of the new earth being like creating a new garden. And so this person said, all innuendo and no substance. And of course, the intention of that person was that to put me down, make me feel less. And I laughed and I said, oh, thank you for reading my post. So the result was, the next thing I get an answer, and it said, why are you thanking me? And I went, because you offered me an opportunity to have a look at myself and to check and to make sure that the way that I was expressing myself was the way that, I had good intentions of expressing myself. And you know what? I came out really good because there was no comeback. And so it's learning, and that to me is sovereignty. That is like, thank you, but actually, you cannot imprint on me anymore. So, of course, this person I didn't know and has absolutely no emotional ties to me. So it's easy. But I always found that with my kids, that they were the ones that could always somehow get in there. And the people that I love, that's not as easy. But when you learn to express your feelings in truth from iMessages, this is how I feel. When people are trying to get you to do things that you don't really want to do, right? The inside of you says, it doesn't really feel right, but I have to fit in because otherwise I lose my job. I have to fit in or I lose their approval. I have to fit in because, but inside, this is not my path. Then what I have learned is to say, well, this is how I feel. This just doesn't feel right for me, because I can't argue with that. I can't say, well, you don't feel that. Yes, I do. I feel this. Not you make me feel, or I don't agree with you. All those terms can be shot down in flames. But what cannot be shot down in flames is, well, this is how I feel. It's the end of the argument, really, because it's how I feel. Now, if I don't like how I feel, then I can go home and I can look at that feeling and see where it originated from and what it triggered. And was it for my highest good or not for my highest good? But in that moment, I can say, this is how I feel. So I guess that is how I slowly but surely peeled away the veil of illusion and falsity and found my sovereignty. And every day, that is something that has to be put first. If you're asking me to do something that opposes that feeling of truth, of being in tune with my soul and being in aligned with the frequency that is who this is, then I am compromising me. And I'm not being in truth. And I've learned that I have to pay a price for that.
So true. So true, Yvonne. When we don't listen to that inner truth and we just keep doing it because we want to be loyal. Like I've gone through a tremendous process this last 6 months, let's put it that way, if not longer, where progressively I've run out of more and more rope until I have absolutely nothing left, of leeway in terms of what that inner awareness says about, is this a yay or is it a nay? And that is the will that can totally end up becoming depleted, where I can intellectualize myself. I'm willing to do it because, it's da-da-da-da. But is it intellectualized, or is it that authentic truth? And I love how you bring the relevancy of feeling, what I call feeling-based relating, into this, because it is everything that I feel that we are, and people in the Brave New Life community will know about this, that what we are doing in our circles in Brave New Life is simply called feeling-based relating. And without me saying anything about why that's relevant or that's just what we are exploring, which is speaking in those I statements where it's about me and my feelings. And one of the things that I elicited for myself in what led me to finding also that languaging around it is that anything other than feeling-based relating most often is some form of contract-based relating. because it's mind-based relating. And so people are trying to contract people into becoming part of their story, or wanting to have them side with them. And I have discovered that there is so much unresolved trauma that's in even the most beautiful and the most spiritual communities comes out, and I can see it for what it is, because I have really kind of unpacked the ability to see it happening, and then free myself from the judgment, because for as long as I hold myself in judgment, I'm not even free. So if I want to be free and I want to be sovereign, which is something that in my learning I'm only returning closer to within. There's no sovereignty out there. There's no I that can accomplish sovereignty. Sovereignty is what we were born as, what we were, what our innate human nature is a beautiful word for. And what has really happened is that we've been leading ourselves, but also, of course, programmed and conditioned to not even relate to ourselves in that way anymore. But that still doesn't let go or set us apart or away from our feeling-based nature. Because we have only been programmed sort of here out of that sort of fear mechanics and that trauma-based mind control that we can see the effects of in the world today. But our feeling-based nature, our innate truth, our innate knowing, that's never gone away. All that has gone away is that it's just been layered with tremendous amount of fear-based programming that makes us then think, oh, I better not say what it is that I don't really want to do that. And it's been interesting because I hold myself to account a lot. And I then recognize that I have been doing exactly what I've just spoken about for a whole series of months. And it is all performing a function with purpose for me to then go like, well, that's a significant pattern. Where does that really come from? And what's all entangled in it? And how do I untangle all of that? Because the real question is, do I want to keep doing it like this? Do I want to feel like I have, it's almost like I am carrying a level of resentment to doing certain things that isn't necessarily of my thinking. It's me just going in against myself for so long that my inner will says, nah, not available. I don't care. What you kind of run me dry here. And it's like I'm discovering the difference between, on a deeper level, that feeling-based truth, and then this like, yeah, but I see all the great ideas, and I see, and I can do all of this, and I who is this person that wants to show up in the world in this, look at what I can all do? Is that what I really came here for? And how much of it is truly in alignment with what my inner knowing says? And do I dare to feel into that? Because I've learned, and I'm at the second time in my life at this point, and I'm referring this much to the first time, that if I don't listen, there's an imminent wilting and total stagnation and a total kind of dying and fizzling out of any spirited moving forward energy that is available from
creativity.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so there's that returning to that story and that innate knowing of self, what it came here for. And it wants to take me somewhere where I'm probably not yet prepared to go, but who is I and who is not prepared? And so these are good conversations to have, because after each conversation, I always get to reflect and sit with what we talked about, because there's no point me, sharing anything around this if I don't practice this on a daily basis. One thing that I wanted to discuss with you, Yvonne, is the notion of equality and equanimity, because there's some connotations for people around sovereignty, that it's about being in dominion or being, well, then you're sovereign and they're not sovereign. And how I relate it to myself is that the only reason that I've chosen this name for myself so that I can hold myself accountable every day. Because how on earth can I call myself sovereign if I put somebody else down? If I'm anything less than love? And so in that process, I have also learned to practice a lot of forgiveness on myself, because I haven't been perfect over these past years. And I have been upset with people and judged them and blamed them. And but I lose my sovereignty in the moment of putting somebody under me or putting myself under somebody else. And I forget that we're all equal, unique individuals. And we all have a shared equal value of being here on this earth. I'd like you to share a little bit around that, if you feel to go into that space, because for me that aspect of sovereignty as a word that is maybe unfamiliar to some people, they kind of have got this like, I don't actually want to be sovereign, because that means that I'll be more than somebody else. And it couldn't be further away from that.
But you see, that's a word that's been hijacked again,
Yeah.
because we relate sovereignty to kingdom, to rulers, and then we have made these people celebrities to look up to. We've sold our soul for a lot of their requirements. So then to go and say, but I choose to be sovereign, then the conditioned mind, subconscious, says, well, that means that you have to have power over. Because what we see is kings, sovereigns are rulers over. So instantly we feel that means that we need to rule over. Yes, and we do, but not over out there. It's over in here. And that's a difficult concept for people.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the connotation of words. And you and I, who tend to pick words apart and look at them, realize that every word that we speak, we've been taught. And it is the connotation of the teacher that is imprinted on the word that you now use until you unpack it and change it. Gosh, that's big. I had never put it like that, but that's true, though, isn't it? And so the word sovereignty, again, it is something that we relate to power over. And what we're really talking about is power over the within. It's not easy to bring out. The more power you have over self, and it comes back to feeling. Mm-hmm. Having power over your feeling, and it's not even power, it has nothing to do with power. I remember when I was younger, I had this, and this is something that you now would have inside of you, because there's something that wants to birth itself through you, because I can feel that, because that's what I do. I work with energy, and that's all that I feel. And I know that within me for so long, I could feel this power within. And in the early days, and anyone who's ever listening to this and knew me when I was nursing would have known that I learned how to use power over. I was very good at what I did, but I was officious rather. Very, very, good at my job, but also expected that from others as well. So it was something that I learned, that within me there was this power that wanted to be expressed. But I was so terrified of it, because I thought, I'm already blowing people out of the water. If I let this out, I'll be like an atom bomb. So I sat on it for so long, all through, until I could sit on it no longer. And it was either that or go. And funny thing was, when I gave it permission to shine, I realized that it was the opposite. the more that I found my inner power, the more gentle I became, the more accepting I became, the more tolerant I became, the more compassionate I became, for me first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by doing it for me first, by healing that inner child's wounds, and there were many, having lived through 2 wars already, and so that healing of that inner part of me, and allowing and giving it compassion and love and joy and setting it free, that's when that's called empowerment. I found this power that was wanting to be expressed was not a power over anyone out there. It was all about having the power to allow my authenticity, the beauty of the essence that lives within, that the human kindness that is at the core of all humans, that gets destroyed through fear and lack and trauma. And that when we find that back, that is when we have equality. That's when we can have equality for each other, with each other, because there is no I'm better than you, I'm more than you. We all are so uniquely configured energetically that when we understand that, we become this magical orchestra of humankind that is now getting more and more fine-tuned so we can play together.
Yeah. Wow. So beautiful. Yeah. The, the triangle that I found for me, that it started really through this initial commitment, and a willful commitment. And then I later discovered everything around the will that it's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. To re-enable the faculty of the will as a compass for our navigation, which in most human beings has just been downright smashed. Your will is not important. What you want, you're not going to get. And there's just so much around that I kind of worked out. So how do we relate then as human beings to honor each other's will, and to not try to contract each other subconsciously, which is really coercion, which we've just been programmed to coerce each other, for the most part, in this context of a economic framework that we all are set to operate into in some form or another, or well, in the end of it, you'll just starve, I suppose. And so a lot of our natural territory as human beings, and the natural economy of being an abundance based sharing with each other, in sort of a gift economy, has of course been changed over to a lack and scarcity model where it's about control and power. But that's all the powers that are, it's a misuse of power, so to speak, because what you're relating around for me has been the awakening of that power of love. And that has been something that in myself, in different stages and different phases, I definitely have been afraid of. And what was afraid was the parts in me that weren't loved. So how could I love this person? Because I know that I can, and I know that I've informed myself enough and remembered enough that I benefit being compassionate. But I found that I had a resistance to being compassionate or being fully loving, because what was done to me, I was recognizing in them. And so I still had to do that reintegration and repair work, which required love as well. And so for me, it's been that study of human nature, which I call syntropy, which then leads me into this whole field of what is human nature. Well, that's the realm of self-sovereignty. But the only way to complete the return to any of those aspects is that there needs to be a commitment to self-love, which needs to be drawn out of the will, which is in that field of sovereignty. So we have human nature, our sovereignty, and our self-love as a kind of turning mechanic that just keeps looping back in on each other. That human nature is that we are self-love. And so we don't really have to source outside of ourselves for that. And we require that love in order to restore that sovereignty. This is what I discovered, is that it's only ever a remembering, a returning, and a restoration and a regeneration of what originally was, and also will forever remain our human nature. It's not like we're going to go to a new place. It may feel quite fresh and refreshing, and it's like, oh wow, I didn't know why I was so afraid of this. And at the same time, it is only a return to what our natural, call it inheritance is, but our natural place of being. And I see that the power of love in relationship to that power within that you speak about, it's been for me what I have actually feared probably the most. And to be able to then invert that fear and look at it to within, as opposed to, oh, why am I afraid of this person? What it is, I just want to love them. So what sits in the way of me loving? And it's again and again, it's just been imprinting. It's just been conditioning. It's just been all that unfortunate stuff that only I get to remove and resolve for me. And that's what I feel has been my outcome then, to also sit here and share with you. As I listen to you, I recognize that's the outcome for you as well, because there is a greater compassion going out to the world, where it's like, if we're all born for love, if we're born of love in its original soul frequency, so to speak, then the return to that not only is a great feat and a great adventure, but it's also our greatest purpose.
There's something that really helped me right from the beginning, and that was when I can't remember where it came from. I never remember where anything comes from. But it was that you can't give what you don't have. And I started teaching that, and I used to say to people, well, the way to describe that is, if I might have with all the will in the world, I want to give you $10. But if I don't have the $10, I can't give it to you. And I knew from me that my essence was pure love. And I was very good at loving. But what I realized was that I could only love to the degree of love that was within me. And then I had this wonderful analogy given to me. I think it's the Rider-Waite Ace of Cups is a cup that has things overflowing on the sides. And I always saw that from that day forward, it was my intention to fill my cup every day. That's why I still get up at 5:30 in the morning to fill my cup. And that the overflowing of that cup is free for anyone to have. Yeah, but beautiful. What's in the cup is mine. And that was just such a gift for me, because it gave me, and you talk which I, so it gave the big I, as I call it, gave that I permission to the little I to put me first.
Yeah.
And it is that we struggle against, that we have been taught that it's selfish to put me first. And, you're being up yourself and all of that rubbish. Oh, look at that person. They really think they're wonderful. Yes, I do. Pretty good. Because I've worked at it, and I work at it every day to be as wonderful as I choose to be, so that I feel okay in me, so that I'm free. Sovereignty is freedom. It is the freedom to love, which is it's a nature, without any restriction of how that is received, or whether it is approved of, or if somebody is judging it, or someone is not liking the way that you do it, or whatever. It is just being pure, true to self. And in the problem with that is that we have language that tells us that that self has to be the same as you. Otherwise, there's something wrong with it. I have so many people who will say to me, yeah, I agree with you. And I say, I don't give a shit. I'm not saying these things so you agree with me. I say things so that you will think about it within yourself and you agree with you.
Yeah.
Because agreeing with me isn't going to do anything for me. If I was in my ego, would say, oh, that person agrees with me. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Oh,
and that is how we're brought up, right?
Yeah. Well, or brought down.
Yeah. So, or brought under.
Yeah.
And so to find our sovereignty is to find our purity. It's to find that part of us that that was in us when we were born.
Yeah.
The foundation, the energetic configuration. And when we find that back and we learn to play it, I would say each person is a Stradivarius. And we just have to find it. And when we find it, we have to learn to play it.
And then, of course, we also want to tune it.
Well, before you play it, you must tune it. And you have to tune it every day because they're incredibly finely tuned instruments. And they need to be tuned and retuned and retuned continuously to keep to that vibrational frequency, which is so, so refined. And that is what we're finding about ourselves, is that every day, that is why it's so important to have a spiritual, what you call spiritual practice, where every morning you fine-tune your instrument before you offer it to somebody else.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So, yeah, hey, getting up that early, that's when I fine-tune my Stradivarius. And every day I practice playing it. And people may not like the way that I play my, I think of, what is it? Andre Rieu, I can never say it, I ought to, he's Dutch. But he played his Stradivarius much to the, the up and coming real classical violinist. How dare he do to that instrument what he does? Plays pop music. But if you see what he does, as soon as he finishes, it goes into a beautiful case, and it's very carefully, and it's taken away, and it's taken care of with such love and such appreciation for what he can make that instrument do. And that is who we are. We are our own personal Stradivarius, and we have to take that much care of us. And we need to fine-tune the instrument so that the sound, which is the soul, can be expressed in its fullness through us.
Yeah.
But we're not taught that, of course not, because then we don't need governors. So sovereignty for me means self-governing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And for me, this has been an ongoing conversation, an ongoing exploration in, I wish there was a fast-tracked path to self-sovereignty for anybody. But that's just a total fantasy. It's been my intention, and it's been my vision, and it's actually the reason why I started Brave New Life Community, to actually share from what I have learned in terms of using feeling-based relating as a metric of authentically attuning to self so that we can start revealing what is all alive for us. But I never got myself to the next step of actually sharing more around how I relate to that internal landscape and how everything seems to be an inversion, and that very much there is an innate attraction within people to the softer, quote unquote, version of sovereignty, but the truer version of it. There's a lot of people that pursue the path of self-sovereignty through means of studying law and the legality, which is all fraudulent everywhere you go. It is a corrupt system, and it is corrupt because it has taken the power of the people and put it in the hands of a few under the guise of a constitution. But look at the place where you're living. That constitution is not even active because the Commonwealth is a corporation. So when we start going down those paths, and I've looked at it just like, everything seems to be registered in Washington, D.C. at some level, to be on a trading market exchange, all these different government factions. It's just what we've ended up with. And it's an endless rabbit hole with endless battles with, we'll call them demons, because governments don't exist. Go point me out a government. So who is the person that is that government? And so it's a fiction, and it's an illusionary appearance of something. And yes, it does all these things, and I'm not here to discard the whole lot, but I'm certainly seeing that it's taken humanity in the main really out of self-organizing and being self-determining and being self-governing. And doing that as a community, how would we embark on that other than through feeling-based relating? Because we know, when we look back now, where we got to with just using the intelligence. Well, that didn't really get us very far. So if that wasn't actually the metric, and there is no arguments to have when somebody says, I feel, when you said that, I felt, well, then you can just, wow, that's beautiful that you're willing to acknowledge what you felt. That's actually quite courageous. And so to cultivate that has been my initial step, to see if more people resonate even with that orientation, and then to let that lead itself into the natural return to self-sovereignty. But I am discovering that without having these conversations around the roadmap, around what people can come into awareness of in terms of the hows, the ways, the means, what benefits being trained into and remembered and reactivated and actually sternly practiced attunement in such a fashion, that all of that benefits really being spoken about, because we are wired for that natural state of freedom. We're not wired to be preoccupied with what the neighbor is thinking, or what the guy that is the president that we don't even know who he is, or the governor, or the police constable that we don't even know by name. We don't know any of these humans, and it's all just playing out in our own inner world. And that's where, for me, that part of the syntropic orientation becomes relevant, because in order to discover what the function of life is and what it's doing, we best put ourselves in a space of curiosity and openness, to come into awareness, to be curious, like, well, if it's performing a function with purpose, maybe if I stop judging it, I may actually learn what it's trying to teach me, because that's what I have found. The entire external reality is just one big reflective teaching ground for me to look at myself. And that's almost like my inner sovereignty creating circumstances and events for me, so that my inner nature, causing me to run up against issues and challenges and hardships and whatever it is, physical breakdowns, financial breakdowns, all of that hero's journey is just for me to really come home to self deeper and return to the sovereign within.
Yes. just something that you just said about, creating the space for people to express their feelings, which is essential for us to find our sovereignty. However, because there is so much trauma and so much pain in the beginning, those feelings come from that place. And one of the things that we need to learn is that if we perpetuate those feelings, this is why counseling never works. Because counseling, people just keep regurgitating their pain, and what we focus on, we bring about. What we pay attention to, we fuel. What we what we have our attention to. So it just gets stronger. This is why it is really important to not be putting any attention on the games that are being played outside, and putting your attention on what it is that you feel and what you would like to have as a life experience, how you would like to live if you didn't have someone else make laws for you that you didn't agree with, if you didn't have someone else tell you when to go out and when not to go out, whether to go to school or not to go to school, and a million other things. When you would just follow your heart, then you would go to your neighbor and you would start talking to them and saying, well, what can I help? What can we do together? Can we grow vegetables together? I remember when I first left my marriage, I moved into a townhouse, and I had this neighbor. She used to hang over the fence with a basket of veggies. It was just wonderful, right? And so that's the kind of thing that we do naturally. We share with each other. We give what we have. However, we have been so conditioned into a position of lack so someone else can control us that we have got this fear around being open and honest with each other. And so expressing our feelings is one thing. It is healing the feelings that are not serving us any longer. That is important, because I can tell you how I feel so scared of what might happen, but unless I can process that and integrate that and alchemize that and bring that home in love to a place where I no longer feel that feeling, because that feeling is not allowing me to become more sovereign. It is actually stopping me from being sovereign. So it is important to understand that there's more than just expressing my feelings. It is identifying those feelings and finding out, are they serving me? Are they serving my growth? Are they serving my expansion? And if they're not, what can I do to give that feeling compassion and love and bring it home so that it no longer it influences me in a way that keeps me contained? This is why the drama of mainstream media is all based on fear. Nobody starts the news saying, well, what can we do today to make you feel more sovereign? Wouldn't that be fun?
Wouldn't that be fun? Yes. Well, we have our own platform where we do get to encourage people to step into that more. But I feel that I've indeed modified my orientations, and I've backtracked it all, and it's been really quite fascinating how I actually put myself under, in this case, one particular individual, out of fear of abandoning someone, out of fear of also being abandoned, and so that there's still something there, and going into the pleasing and suppressing my own shine in what I initially started the Brave New Life community for, because what you just spoke about, where we're just, after an hour in, and this is a conversation that could go on for days, really, because there is no one simple approach to this. There isn't one simple, because the mechanics of our internal landscape and how we re-enable that natural ability to feel free, to feel safe, to feel whole, depending on the myriad of traumatic imprints that sit in the way of that. There is going to be some cleaning out that benefits doing. And what came up for me is that the unresolved will remain unresolved until it's properly resolved. And if people haven't expressed a willingness, a preemptive willingness, I am willing that when stuff comes up for me, when feelings come up, instead of just sharing the feelings and allowing that to be the process of, oh, I feel lighter now, which is a beautiful thing, to already be able to use your voice in a communal space, to find the courage to speak. But there's so much more to it in terms of that inner work that really is part of a biological and psycho-emotional mechanics of what really happened. And of course, I researched MK Ultra programming and trauma-based mind control to figure out how do they split people's minds and emotional bodies and then create these, what they call alters, these different personas. And then I realized that this entire world around us is an MK Ultra, mind control experiment. And then I realized, well, I think that I better go and look within myself to go and figure out if there are any names to any of the parts that are carrying any of the trauma. And lo and behold, was I amazed. And that is a level of conversation that I really would like to explore with you more. I know that many different people have shared around this, but I feel that it's so relevant in relationship to coming back home to sovereignty and freedom from within. There is a conversation that benefits being had around. So how then? Yeah, loving yourself. Okay, yeah. But being committed to that to such a degree that when your emotional reactions come up, that you also know what to do with them, that you have an awareness there that says, this is actually an opportunity for my growth, or this is performing a function for me, as opposed to going into, oh, you're being so horrible to me. Why did you do this?
Well, I think every time we touch on one subject, a whole dozen come up that we could be talking about. But something that you just brought up before, and that's why I got really excited, because you used the word abandonment. And that is something I would like to unpack. Because over all the years that I've worked with people, I find that most inner children feel abandoned. And they don't feel abandoned by necessarily the parents or the carers. They feel abandoned by us.
Yeah.
And I believe
left behind.
Yeah, because we are, if you look at children, they can't wait to become adults. Something that I always told my kids, don't give up your childhood. Mostly because I didn't have one, right? So I decided to have a childhood when my first son was born, who's about to turn 50. So it is, and did you get the photo of me as Minnie Mouse? I sent it to you on an email. Because I like to play. I think this is the inner child wants to play. We suddenly become such serious little adults, and God, that's a pain in the neck if ever there is. So we have to give ourselves such allowance. And I think that what you were talking about just then has a lot to do with that feeling of abandonment. That we don't
and what responsibility we have, because nobody is going to come knock on our door. It's not our father or our mother that will say, remember when we were in the shopping center and I left you behind? I'm so sorry. It's just like it. Those things never happen, and so it all comes down to our own individuality, to start taking responsibility that outside of the trauma that we were once left behind, there is a whole range of other parts of self that are also all left behind. And there's quite a, I haven't experienced a lot of upsetness within these parts of self towards me not finding them, but there has been a great sense of having been left behind, having just been having to sit there under the staircase in the locked up little doorway because my brother put me in there.
Mhm.
And I, you know, 30 something years later, am finding that part of self.
Yeah,
And
but your
I have,
brother put you in there. Your brother put you in there 30 years ago, but you left. You kept yourself in there.
exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, I always say that the event is gone, but you keep yourself there. And
Yeah.
until we go back and we retrieve that part of us with love, that part will always feel abandoned. So
So
that's part, well, that's going to be quite some session.
I love it. We're at 111 again. And
Oh, yeah.
we'll call it off here. This will be up on Earth Heroes for quite some time, which is that other platform. Both the Brave New Life community platform is a beautiful space, and then we have, of course, our Earth Heroes TV that is very nice to be able to host this content on, and it will be coming part of that little Awakening Sovereignty um, series that is on there, where the different conversations around trauma, sovereignty, the restoration of wholeness, how we piece all of that together. And for me, and I feel that's the same for you, Yvonne, is that there's a natural, compelling sense coming from within to talk about this. Not because I still feel wounded, it's just that cup around that subject is able to overflow. And it doesn't come from that space of, I need to get other people into this cup to feel that my sovereignty is feeling alive and kicking or something like that. It's such a soft and gentle metric that just like the truth almost doesn't require to be spoken about. But I've learned that if we do not speak about what we've remembered, um, we're not honoring. I'm not honoring what is alive from me and from within me that wants to give expression to these insights and to this time, because we did come here for much more than to be trauma-based, mind-controlled humans that limit themselves and keep themselves limited.
No, and for me, I just have a passion to share what I've learned.
Yeah.
And if I've learned to live a life that is giving me inner peace and love and harmony in the middle of chaos, then I think I'd like to share that.
So good. So beautiful, Yvonne. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for sharing if you're watching this on social media. And we'll be here again next week on Friday.
And
Beautiful.
thank you, as always. Shine your light, Mister.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yay.
Love you lots.